After 44 years of inaugurating the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation in 1977 as a colonel in the Nigerian Army and Minister of Petroleum Resources, President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday made history again, where he unveiled the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, an exercise which saw the NNPC officially transit to a limited liability entity in line with the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act. With the change in structure, the company will now be regulated in line with the provisions of the Companies and Allied Matters Act from yesterday. The inauguration of NNPC Limited, which allows the company to become listed on the stock exchange with the sales of its shares now available to the public, positions the company on the same operational level as other successful state-owned petroleum corporations, such as Brazil's Petrobas and Saudi Arabia's Aramco. Let's talk about this, and I'm being joined live from our Abuja studios by the Chief Executive Officer of Cabtree, Mr. Bode Sowunmi. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Always a pleasure to be here.
Yes. Mr. Bode, let's start with this, this development in the oil and gas industry. Many see it as a real welcome development. NNPC becoming a limited liability company. In general terms, how does this come to you? And I hope the expectations are not too high.
Well, first of all, Nigerians cannot have too much expectations from its government and its governance. So that needs to be put in perspective. But more importantly, this development is going to put and test the structure of the PIA in terms of what the PIA really has to offer. So in simple terms, the transformation within NNPC speaks to the fact that NNPC is expected to be more accountable. So for one, they are going to, by law, be required to produce audited reports, annual audited reports. They are going to have standard accounting protocols for the accounting system. As a result, they will be able to have a business plan to attract foreign direct investment with little government interventions within it. What that will mean is a more nimble, more productive, more efficient NNPC, which will be able to actually bring appropriate profit to government and governance. So in reality, we are going to have an NNPC that is going to be more effective and more real to the people of Nigeria. Equally importantly, you are going to have an NNPC that is going to be more transparent. That, whichever way you look at it, as quantum leaps and welcome developments.
What about the argument or the submission that this would stimulate investment and the NNPC will be able to get into further deals that would help make the company more profitable?
You know, basically, what do investors look at, or where would you want to put your investment? It's very simple. You want to put your investment where you are sure of where the fund, how the money is spent. You want to be sure it's a place where rule of law, where there is law and order. You want to be sure in that place there's accountability, that the money won't be stolen, and you want to be sure that those people do their job. Those things that I've mentioned are what the new structure of NNPC will produce. And once they produce that, anybody who wants to put his money somewhere will be interested and attracted to it. So yes, in realistic terms, NNPC is going to become a better bride for those who have investment intentions in that perspective.
With the downstream, and you are an expert in this sector, maybe you help us understand all of these issues, the differentials, the under recovery and all that we see, particularly now that the price of crude is on the high side. If the NNPC will now operate independently, what would happen to price of products?
Well, we need to understand the policies and the strategies for which that will work. So it is incumbent upon us as stakeholders, which includes you, by the way, as media, to ask the NNPC to make available in writing to the public the medium and the rules of their interaction of entities. We need to understand, because they are still the custodians of the crude, which actually belongs to the Nigerian people. So we just need to understand how the operations will work. It is based on that that we will query the system of refining for production. If the DSDP that's the direct sale, direct purchase, will still going to be operational. We're also going to query it as interested people, as stakeholders, and it is from there we will determine whether there are losses or interest. So in real terms, we should not be too quick to get to determine whether there will be subsidy or not. But let's query it, let's follow the money, and I'm sure Nigerians will be happy with a new NNPC in place.
Also ask you that monthly remittances to FARC, according to this new regime, might stop. Already, we've seen some reductions in that. If that happens, I'm thinking some states can't even pay salaries and they're already complaining about the shortfall from FARC. What would happen if the NNPC now totally hands off that in this new regime?
Okay, NNPC, the way it operates,
yes,
is not operating as a service company, is not operating as a company producing its own products. NNPC is operating with crude oil and natural gas resources, which actually belong to the Nigerian people. They are just a management company, so to speak, to manage what our resources are. So by virtue of simple, straightforward business operations, they must contribute to FEC. So it is what they are entitled to contribute to FEC and what they contribute to FEC that is a different matter, but they will contribute to FEC. With respect to the amount the states will get, whether they're going to get enough for their operations, is actually an economic matter. But it's important to note that we all say that necessity is the mother of invention. With the pressure that will come into limited availability of resources, will come an invention of the human mind to tackle the challenges that we face. And I believe that we should not underestimate the Nigerian ingenuity and that we will survive whichever way. Whether there is more funds, we will survive with it. Whether there is little funds, we will still overcome the challenges. It will be difficult for a while. Please don't let us confuse it. But I believe that we'll do fine.
Companies saying that there will be additional investments to increase gas production. Let's talk a bit around gas. What really can we do to explore the proven and, of course, unproven reserves that we have with gas in this part of the world? We're yet to take advantage of that. Look at what is happening globally. What do you think, what do you think NNPC would do that would change the narrative?
Okay, there are some things already in place with respect to gas. So what needs to be done is that those things need to be continued. We must understand very, very clearly that gas is not like selling rice. It's not like selling tomatoes either. This is an infrastructure business. And just like what happens between Russia and the rest of Europe, they have built the infrastructure that they supply to Europe over decades. It's not going to change overnight. So it's the same thing here. So gas has infrastructure that needs to be built around the country. And one of the foundations to that is the AKK, that's the Ajaokuta Kaduna Kano pipeline, for which the government is spending efforts on. When that is built, all the states that are close to it, which it passes through, whether it is Niger, whether it is Benue, whether it is Kogi, whether it's Kwara, whether it's Kaduna, they can actually benefit from the AKK by ensuring that industrial parks can be built for which gas can be a solution to it. We need to understand that there are 4 focus areas for the gas master plan, which is the plan of the government for gas. So you are talking about gas to power, which is where gas interconnects with the power sector. You are talking gas-based industries. Those are industries that use gas as raw material. So you are talking about methanol, you are talking about fertilizer, you're talking about steel. You are talking about gas to industry. So those are industries that use gas to power the industrial machines. And of course, LPG, which is the cooking gas. These 4 areas are the focus areas for government. If the targets, if the full needs of those places are met, there will be a lot of employment within the nation, and there will be what you call even development within the country. So it is not so much as in reinventing new things, but it is about paying attention and being consistent with the things that are already at work.
Let's almost finally, let's look at expansion in the downstream space, which is also something that the NNPC is talking about getting on as work starts. The total aim is energy security for Nigerians. But with the current process or the current model being run in our downstream space, do you think there should be some changes? Can we sustain this heavy payment? The direct question, you know it, subsidy.
Well, you see, should there be subsidy? It's a yes or no question, depending on where you come from. And it's also a political question. But rather than me speaking to whether there should be subsidy or not, the issue, first of all, is that how much subsidy exists. Or should I use the language of government, how much under recovery exists? And this is something that you and I can help them to calculate, because it's not rocket science. So where is the funds for subsidy coming from? We're talking about the crude that is going to be processed. We're talking about the cost of shipping to the refinery where it's going to be processed. We're talking about the cost of refining. And then we're talking about the cost to transport it back into Nigeria. So within these four processes is where we get the cost of the products and the amount that is subsidy. But guess what? The cost of crude is an international price because crude oil is a commodity. So it's not going to change everywhere. The cost of transportation is international. Shipping companies transport at about the same range all over the world. The cost of refining is international. So nobody is going to have extraordinary prices for refining. And of course, the other cost of transportation. So what we need to happen is that let's get the NNPC Limited to give us their cost. Let them break it down. The landing cost for their cost of crude, their cost of refining, their cost of transportation. And then you and I can Google and ask companies how much they do this thing. And that way, we can now compare what they are selling their crude versus how much the international prices say. And then we can begin to talk about the amount of crude oil, the amount of subsidy that is in place. But without the transparency of the figures, I think we don't really know whether there is subsidy or what amount is involved in the subsidy. So rather than arguing in an opaque or a dark room, let's first shed light into the room and determine what is happening. Then we can now be talking about the amount of subsidy that is in place.
Finally, how long do you think we'll wait for? I guess there's going to be a transition period, which we are going through at the moment, for us to start to see the positives of the PIA in its totality?
Well, change is a continuum. But when it comes to results of what we will see, we should expect to start seeing from today. So there are certain things that will change in terms of the accounting process. We expect that should have started taking place. We expect that they are going to be subject to CAC now. So we expect CAC interactions to happen there. We expect that, just the basic things that happen with these new structures that are in place. We expect those things to start to happen. We expect their board to start to talk to potential investors. We expect more transparency in terms of their operations, in terms of the drilling operations. We expect them to be subject to the regulator. So the regulator who is in place needs to be more knowledgeable than NNPC themselves. Because if you are going to police somebody, you must know more than them. So if you are going to regulate the industry, so the regulator needs to also sharpen itself, improve its capacity, go on training operations, become relevant to what's in the world so that they can actually do their job. So it is a whole stream. Even the media needs to be more knowledgeable so that they can ask better questions. So it is everybody that is responsible for getting NNPC to be the perfect NNPC that it should be. So it's a call to everybody. It's a call to me. It's a call to you. It's a call to the man on the street to ensure that NNPC becomes the best that they should be.
What plays out? An interesting conversation. I must thank you so much, Mr. Bode Sowunmi, for your time in our Abuja studios there as the Chief Executive Officer of Cabtree. Hope to see your face anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.